Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I am delighted to be joined by Sue Hanley and Jennifer Mason, who will be talking to you about a post-Ignite questions and answers wrap-up for business users. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC17. This is a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have for Sue and Jennifer in the questions window and we will discuss. This webinar will be recorded and you will be notified by email when it is available. Don't forget to join us in Dublin from the 13th to the 16th of November 2017 for the European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Conference. Since so much happened at Ignite, our tickets are selling really fast. So book today at sharepointeurope.com to avoid disappointment. And now we're going to begin our questions and answers session with Jennifer and Susan. Hello, Jennifer. Hello, Susan.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Hey,
Hi.
how are you all today?
So far, so good.
Yeah, I'm just
Great.
waking up. A little early for us, but yeah, it's good.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question, if that's okay. And for everybody else that's attending, feel free to type questions into the questions window. But my first question is a very obvious one. Now that Ignite is over, and if there's people thinking about coming to the European SharePoint or ESPC conference, what would you say to them if they haven't quite made up their mind just yet?
I would say go. I mean, book your tickets, be there. First of all, Microsoft is really supporting ESPC. There's going to be a lot of the same speakers there on the Microsoft side, and then a lot of the non-Microsoft speakers will be there as well. And I think, one of the things about being in a more intimate environment is that you'll get more opportunity to have those more personal interactions than you could with 30,000 of your best friends hanging in Orlando.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, the amount that the team is listening to everybody, they want to hear what's working. They want to hear what we think isn't working. They want our feedback. And so anytime you have the opportunity to spend time with a crew from Microsoft, it's really one of the best things that you can do. So conferences are always much more than the sessions. It's kind of bringing everybody together and giving you some of those intimate opportunities that, like Susan was saying, that make it really worthwhile.
Yeah, there was something that happened at Ignite. I wish I could remember the exact details, but earlier in the week there was an announcement about some particular feature. It was a small feature, and then and then apparently they had gotten a lot of negative feedback about the specifics of that feature, what you could and couldn't do when it was first launched. By Thursday, I was in a session where someone mentioned it again, and Adam Harmit said, we've gotten a bunch of feedback this week. We're going to take that back and see whether we can give you what you want when we launch that feature, as opposed to the version that we had thought about rolling out. I thought that was incredibly impressive. Pardon me?
I said, but we'll give you what you want versus what we thought you wanted.
Right. In other words, we heard what you're saying. We realized that, our version of what we thought was a minimal viable product probably wasn't, it needed a little more. And I thought that was incredibly impressive. And that kind of an opportunity, I think, is why you go to conferences. It's why you should be there in person, as opposed to, even though we can watch all of the video, and boy, do I need to, because I think I was overwhelmed and I need to process the sessions I didn't go to and rewatch the ones that I was there madly tweeting, and make sure I can see what I actually missed. But there's no substitution for being able to have that face-to-face interaction. So.
Brilliant. Okay, so Jennifer, Susan, tell us, what are the main highlights, the key takeaways from Ignite?
Well, I think there's two things for me. The key highlights and takeaway, like if I was thinking very big, I would say what they're doing with the communication sites and the hub spots or the hub sites is really something that is going to make what they've been doing all along make more sense. So being able to have a lot of communication sites, different site collections, having them kind of spread out, but being able to connect them to a hub and then share navigation and share theming and stuff like that, that's a really big step of something that they needed to have. And so if I think about, that kind of excites me at that high level. But to be perfectly honest, I think the thing I saw this time that made me the most excited and made me the most giddy, and Sue, I think, will agree with this one. It might not be her most giddy, but I think she'll agree with it. And that would be the needs attention view in a document library. Yeah, she's even excited now. So when you upload a document to a document library and, maybe you don't put in your required metadata, instead of, it just letting you do it and it looking like everything else, it's highlighted little square in yellow and it says need attention, and there's ways that you can go in and set the view to show me everything that needs attention. And so I think some of those visual things that we've been screaming for forever are showing up, and so I think that was the thing that got me the most excited. Little things get me.
Happy dancing in my seat when I saw that. So last year at Ignite, I will never forget this presentation. There was a presentation in which they addressed the problem that exists in Classic SharePoint. When you upload a document the first time, and there is required metadata, if you do not fill it in and check in the document, that document is essentially invisible, and it is extraordinarily confusing. This is in Classic SharePoint. So in modern Doc Lives, Microsoft realized that this was a problem. In fact, in the presentation, they quoted a blog post that was written like a mystery story. It was a dark and stormy night, and I couldn't find my documents. And the funny thing is, I wrote that blog post in 2009, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God, please don't blame me, because what they did was they went exactly in the opposite direction. Required metadata was no longer required. It's just kind of a suggestion. You upload a document, it's visible to everyone, whether or not you have required metadata. That's actually okay if the metadata doesn't need to trigger a process. But if it does, that really does still have content that's missing required attributes. So now what they've done is kind of brought metadata back with, I think, the best of both worlds. My favorite thing with regard to this is, what I never loved about drag and drop as much as I love it is that there's no prompt for metadata when you drag and drop an individual or multiple documents. And what I saw that just made me crying with tears was drag and drop a bunch of documents into a DocLib, and you can bulk edit the metadata right then. I mean, to me, that is, metadata is back. You can use it safely. No content will be harmed by the use of metadata. And then with the combination of attention views to look at what's missing metadata, I mean, I agree with you. That probably was my favorite announcement from an enterprise content management perspective, or I guess I should call it content services perspective. I mean, all of the content services or ECM announcements, to me, as an information architect, I could not be smiling more.
I'm pretty sure the first time I was in the session and they demoed it, they did actually say Sue Hanley will love this. Not going to lie. They like to pull that out quite a few times.
Great. I have a question here. Was there anything announced about being able to check in multiple documents at the same time?
You can already do that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then the next part of the question is, you are able to drag and drop multiple documents, but it's such a pain to have to check in each one singly. A big
don't
pain
have to.
For my users.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. So you add all the metadata, clicks in, save, and you're in. And actually, bulk editing, we got that, I think, in 2010. Bulk check-in. It used to be in the ribbon, but you can select all your documents and say check-in, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Okay.
So I think that may be one of those, I call those the Wizard of Oz things. You actually already had that privilege, so you click your heels 3 times and you can go home. I mean, a lot of times some of the capabilities are buried or hidden in such a way that you don't even realize that you have them.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So you had that. You may have had that superpower all along.
Okay. Another question here is, with so much change happening in the Microsoft stack, am I best to wait? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a great question. Change is a fact of life, and I think more than any other time in the history of the family of tools, if you don't jump in now, you're going to be losing all kinds of business moments. I really think that with all the announcements we just heard, it's time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's time. You don't have to wait. Yes, things will improve. You will get more capabilities, but you know, we demoed, Dave Feldman and I demoed intranet that we're building for a global pharmaceutical, and we are all in with Modern, 100%. We got communication sites about a month before everybody else did, and we have an entire intranet being connected by Modern SharePoint web parts. We built our own global navigation. We are really looking forward to hub sites to make families of sites, and that's going to allow us to create sort of, you know, HR family, IT family. We're still going to have our global nav, but there's no, I think at this point, there's no reason to wait.
Right, and I think that the way that the different groups inside of Microsoft are working together, so like even if you're working in Teams, even if you're working in SharePoint, if you're working in Outlook Online and accessing Planner and different things like that, it's a lot easier now to navigate between all the different solutions. So I think it's easier to let people work the way that's natural to them. I did a training session yesterday, and I was working with different people, and we had probably 4 different generations in the room, and it was very interesting to see. And as we were showing the demo, and I was kind of doing one of those immersion experiences so they could see what everything would be like, and the one person chimed up and she said, you know, I can work this way and get access to the documents, but they're working there because that's where they're comfortable, but we're working on the same set of documents. And so light bulbs were going on in that experience. And so I think it's really a great time. You can get so many efficiencies with Teams that it's a really great time to jump in, you know, both feet in and just experience it.
Yeah, in fact, I think, Jen, the one thing I learned, it took me forever to learn this, that if you actually want people to, the light bulb to go off for how you can work more effectively with the tools that you have to do it in an experiential kind of thing. So
Yeah.
My motto on training is train teams together, even if they're not in the same geography. Get them in a live meeting so that they can, you know, in a Skype for Business, soon to be Teams, in a single session. So at the same time, they can be co-authoring the same document, you know, to have them try working on it from different perspectives, but doing it at the same time. Because when you do that, you get this opportunity not only to get the experience that you were offering your folks, but you also get a chance to have the conversation with the team where they can say, oh, I can see how we can now work together.
Yeah.
Now, guys, let's not name our documents .v1, .v2, .final, .this is really final. Let's put one version of the document and everybody work on it together. Let's talk a little bit about it, what our folder structure should be so that it is organized in a way that makes sense to us. Let's all agree, no subfolders, because while we love folders, they're totally fine. But you start going with nested folders, now you're doing something that is going to come back and haunt you later on. You can't do that. You can't dictate that from the top down in an organization. But a team can decide, just like they decide what the tasks are that everyone's working on.
Yep.
We can decide, how do we want to do this?
Speaking of Teams, is there any indication of when you'll be able to bring in external users?
Done. You can.
Done.
Yeah, they launched that about a week before Ignite.
Right.
That would kind of surprise me. I don't know if somebody hit the release button too soon or they just wanted it to filter out. Honestly, I haven't done too much with it yet because I've been so heads down. But I have a couple of different, I hate the name of it. I had a couple of different team members that have done it with Teams successfully. But yeah, so it's been out and from what I'm hearing, it's working very well.
Yeah, so I'm a member of 2 external teams besides the one in my own tenant. And the way that you experience it from the app or from the web client is that you have to switch network. So it's kind of like the way you do it with Yammer. So what it would make it easier for me is if all of my tenant chats were in the same thread. But you have to context switch. You have to say, okay, I'm going from this project to this, or this tenant to this tenant. It is probably consultants need this more than anybody else because I obviously work with multiple clients, so I have multiple projects and each one in their own sort of team environment. But it actually it has not yet failed at all for me. I'm like flipping back and forth, super easy. You know, each one makes total sense in context, but you do flip the network. It's you know, like you go to the lower right-hand corner and change networks, and you change tenants, and literally in seconds you're where you need to be. So
Yeah, I think to build on the point you said there, Jennifer, is that when these changes happen around Ignite, there's so much news coming out. It's you know, so it probably got swallowed up in all the other announcements that were
Oh
happening.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
And
don't
this
think
this
there's
is
any one person that could tell you all of the announcements that came out at
yeah.
Ignite. They would just be wrong.
Right.
They wouldn't get
You
them
know
all.
what I think it takes a village to keep track of what's going on with the changes, and that's why I always advise my clients to get a team of people, because everybody
Yeah.
focuses on the world from a different perspective. Jen, you and I are looking at the world from the perspective of the business user right now, but the developers are seeing other things that are going on, and what we're trying to do is keep a OneNote notebook of the things that are happening that we need to coordinate about, so that, you know, the team of watchers is each
Yep.
looking at what's going on from a different perspective. Some things require additional training and maybe an announcement to the organization. Some things happen behind the scenes, but even one person in your organization cannot possibly wrap their head around
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
things that might impact you.
And what we
Okay.
do is we actually have a monthly, well, we meet every 2 weeks, and we rotate on our team who is going to be the watchdog for that month. So we kind of rotate with the meeting, and that person is responsible for those 2 weeks to come to the table. We have our sources that we check, and they're just supposed to come to the table and say, hey, here's all of the things. Let's dig in where it makes sense. And so that's one of the ways that we do it, but we split it across different team members, so everybody has that responsibility to look once a month to kind of track it and do that.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a great way to do it.
Okay, next question. Was there anything at Ignite about adding attachments into Power Apps to then create list items with attachments in SharePoint?
I don't know.
Not that I saw. I don't think they got that granular with announcements. The big Power Apps announcements were more like, hey, now we work on SharePoint list, and you know, basic things you could do with Power Apps. They had the rules that came out, so you could set rules on them. I don't know that they had very specific, at least that I saw, not to say that they couldn't. Sue, I don't know if you know, but that one, I don't think they got that granular.
Well, I was in a lot. I didn't go to the Power App sessions because, you know, this was the other thing. It's like choosing your favorite child when it comes to which sessions
Exactly.
you go to. I mean, it was really hard. But here's something that I think you can, to help narrow down where that might have been demoed, if it would have been demoed. The way that this conference was organized was brilliant. They started on Monday with major, broad announcements, and then each day drilled down further and further. So I would look for maybe a Wednesday, Thursday session on Power Apps, and you can go to the Ignite website and do that and watch those sessions and see whether or not what you're looking for was announced in that session. Because all the details, every single detail was absolutely not announced in the blog post. Because if
Right.
you know, if you didn't go to those sessions, those little things like the drag and drop and prompt for metadata, I didn't see that anywhere in a blog post. They didn't share it with the MVPs in advance. So that was news to me and like unbelievably exciting. So I think actually, if you miss something or we don't know the answer to it because we weren't in those sessions and are still trying to watch all those videos ourselves, I would look for a session. You probably wouldn't see it in a Monday session, but maybe by a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday,
Yeah.
you might see that.
Super. Okay. What would you say to end users who are used to email and SharePoint on premise but now feel overwhelmed by Office 365 and the choices that they now have, i.e. groups, teams, Yammer, so that they open their mind to jumping in and giving it a go?
Gosh, this was actually I did a 20-minute session. I called it Lions, Tigers, and Teams, oh my, sorting through the options to connect and collaborate. And that session's available online. And I did one slide that really resonated with people. And I basically talked about this was thanks to Mark Anderson because we worked on this together. We talked about how to think about the different ways to connect with people from the perspective of a sandwich, because that's kind of something we can all relate to. And the way to think about this from my perspective is to think about the use case. What are you trying to do? To whom do I want to collaborate, and what do I want to accomplish? And there are different tools for different purposes, but if you focus on who am I talking to and what do I want to say? So for example, here's one where the answer might be none of the above. Well, I'll just give you an example. So the question might be, you want to go out for a sandwich right now. What tool would we use to do that? And that's what you want to think about. I want to ask Jen, maybe you as well, and then say, so it's like I'm just going to ask Jen and Shane, like, where should we go for a sandwich right now? Now, email might be overkill for that, but that sounds like a good chat. So I might have that in our Teams chat or in Skype for Business, depending on where I am. Where should our team, we're on a project team, where should we order sandwiches from now on? Now, that's probably a decision that we want recorded, that we want everyone to see. So that would be not in our private chat window, but in a team chat, right? So something that everyone on the team would see. We're firing the sandwich guy, and it's you. And that probably, I hope, is not something you do online. I mean, I hope you're going to go into that person's office. So, you have to think about, again, who do I want to talk to? What is the business use case? And so I looked at that through the perspective of sandwiches, and I think that's... And
I did this. I've got a session. I had a 45-minute session on that as well, kind of the same thing, but we went through about 4 or 5 different scenarios. And then talked about what tools we would use when working with those. And Microsoft came out with some joint messaging across all of the product lines, and they talked about your inner loop and your outer loop and what tools you should use. I actually like it. It's a little gimmicky, but in explaining it to a few different people on the outside, it's really resonated well. But, who am I talking to every day? And instead of worrying about what tool should I use, it's more of, just like Sue said, who am I talking to and why? And then from there, you have a lot of different options. And then the thing that I think is most important is that collaboration contract that you put together with your working group to say, this is how we choose to work. I work with a lot of different groups across my organization. Based on my role, I'm kind of a little bit into everyone's everything, and they all communicate differently. So I've got one that we're working in Teams. I have one that we're honestly working in email, and then I have another that's working solely in SharePoint. But if it's working, it works. So, work as a team together to kind of try to do those things, and then try to bring small bits of transformation and maybe try to change things up if there's really efficiencies to be found by doing it differently.
I mean, it's really hard to make this a top-down, you must work this way.
Right.
Although sometimes being overwhelmed with choice is just that, really overwhelming. So I often think it makes sense to give people guidance. So saying, look, if you're working with your inner loop, the people that you know every day, and you are a project, you are going to be working in SharePoint. You are going to have a team site, whether you front door that from capital T Teams, or whether you create it directly from an Office 365 group. But the idea is these are the people that you know and you work with every day. Now, while I might prefer to make our front door Teams, Microsoft Teams, that may not work for every project team. So that's all okay. But you have to agree, I love that term, collaboration contract. You have to agree with your teammates, your inner loop. How are we communicating with one another? So I think that's actually really, that's the important thing, is that teams do have choices. If you as an organization want to say, here's our preferred approach, then I think that's totally fine as well. And I think one of the things I'm really excited about is that the first thing I always do is when I create a new site is I completely reorganize it based on how I think teams should work. So the other big announcement that I think we're all excited about is the ability to create site designs or reusable site templates, so that we could, in fact, create a template for our organization team site, that when you configure a new site, you get a choice of the standard out of the box one or the one that we like. And that sort of gets us a little bit further along. And again, if you're giving someone a tool that they can immediately get started with, they're perfectly happy, I think, to follow your guidelines. and color within the guardrails, because the whole idea is not to choose the tool, it's to get work done.
Great, that's really good. Susan, thank you for that. And I think it kind of goes back to the earlier question about weight or change and this people feeling overwhelmed. I think you've hit the nail on the head with there's so much choice out there, but once you figure out how it works for your group or your organization or your team, you can make the tools work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Teams seems to be a really popular topic today. Is channel level permissions available in Microsoft Teams?
Not yet, but I think that might be coming. I don't like it, by the way. I wouldn't do it that way, because that's like I like all the permissions to be the same for a team. If you really need channel level permissions, I'd rather you create a new team. Because if that's a working group, now, and there are going to be like individual use cases where maybe that wouldn't make sense, but I think you should create, that's almost like creating a subsite. And my favorite quote of all Ignite was when Dan Holm told all the MVPs in our pre-day, subsites are the spawn of Satan, and you shouldn't be creating them. So I think unique permissions on channels, I think it's creating a have and a have not. I don't know, Jen, how do you feel?
Well, no, and I love that. And I want to say something to that because it's so funny because while you were in the MVP session with Dan, I was in the session with Adam that we were delivering, and the question on subsites came up so much. And I think it's really important, even as business users, that we understand. When you look at SharePoint Online versus SharePoint On-Prem, when we were in SharePoint On-Prem, you guys, if you're not an infrastructure person, you probably don't realize all that was going on. But there was this intense level of database management. So there would be governance that would say this site collection is going to go into this content database, and then this content database. There's all this SQL database management that was going on in the back end. And so when we created those sites with all of those subsites and different things like that, it's all managed that way. When we go to the cloud, scalability totally changes. And in order for them to really be able to put the data and manage it at such a large scale, they need a lot more of a lot smaller, which is why site collections are going to make more sense. They would rather have 100 site collections than 2 site collections with 25 subsites each, and it just makes it easier to manage on that back end. And so when you start to see all these new things that are coming out, and there's this drive that almost feels a little bit stressful, because we used to spend days in a conference room with a whiteboard figuring out what was our information architecture going to be and where were things going to go. Now it feels like we're going to this wild, wild west, and everybody gets a site collection, and it can feel very oppressing at first. It's like, oh my goodness, what's happening? But then when you stop to think about what they're doing, it makes it easier for management, and in the long run, your experiences are going to be better, but at the same time, they're bringing out new features that are going to allow you to talk across site collections. So I agree, they're the spawn of Satan because they're very difficult to work with, but that's kind of why. So there is, if you stop and just understand that a little bit more, it makes me sigh a little bit less when I have to deal with how to work through it.
So I know this wasn't really the question, but I'm curious from you, Jen, do you still think we need subsites on-prem, even in 2016?
I think that that's going to go back to your database management, right? Like, I think it's going to depend on how your teams want to do it, because by not having subsites, you might be creating more of a database management. So that's one of those ones where the governance, in my opinion, really needs to be representatives from all aspects of it together making a decision, right? Like, you want to take into play what is it going to take to manage and maintain those databases. So that's kind of how I feel about that one. I think it's a big ol' it depends.
So let's go back to the channel question. So private channels.
Private channels, I wouldn't do them. I think I remember back to the days where you get SharePoint Online, or not even SharePoint Online, just SharePoint, and then we had unique permissions, and we created a big old mess. And it's one of those features that I think it's just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think if there's a need for, like you said, for private communications, I would take that into a separate team or even a separate medium if needed, because I think it's just too confusing.
Yep. I think it's really hard to manage also.
Yes.
because it does impact sort of, then you have the SharePoint Doc Lib that goes with it. The odds of that getting messed up seems huge to me.
Yeah, yes, because then it's a folder, because when you create a new channel, it just creates a folder in the documents
Right.
library, so breaking
we'd have
permissions.
Right,
yeah.
we'd have to permission the folder. I mean, I think there's a reason. You can still do a private one-to-one chat. So, yeah.
Good point. Good point. We have an update on the earlier question about. So it's in the classic library view, you have the checkout and check-in options on the ribbon, and these work on multiple documents. In the modern library view, the checkout and check-in options are only available if you have one document selected. There's an update. So that's the great thing about webinars. So
yeah,
live
awesome.
as it happens.
Okay, give you a hint. All right, here's what I would do in that use case. There's a little button in the lower left that says Return to Classic. Return to Classic, both check them in, and then you can flip right back, because that is the other thing that they also announced is an easy way to flip back and forth. Because it used to be you flip it to Classic, now you're in Classic until the browser session ends. I'm pretty sure now you can go back, or you will be able to go back. So what I would do is,
glorious.
if a feature isn't available and you want to use it, flip, do it, and flip back.
Okay, we'll probably have an update later in this webinar on how this person's getting on doing this. This is like webinar stroke live help with Jennifer and Susan.
Whoever it is, would you go ahead and try that? Because I think it's going to work. I think that will actually do it.
Okay, they're listening. They know who they are. We'll keep you updated. The suspense is killing me. Okay, next question. In big projects with sub-projects, how do you organize them? Is it sub-sites and help to keep it together? Partly the same people, some visibility needed, yet clear enough, or is everything in one site is too much?
Hub. So that's the best announcement, Jen's favorite announcement, mine too, is the concept of a hub site. And what a hub site is going to do, it's going to allow you to connect related families of sites. Like, for example, I imagine a hub for a program. Each project, which has different people, a different team. This is, again, the whole philosophy is each unit of work gets their own site collection. But sometimes you want to roll things up. Like I'm the program manager. You want to roll up news and activity. And so that's what the hub site is. It allows you to create families of site. And it automatically rolls up news and activity metrics. And what I didn't see, but I'm hoping, is that I could use highlighted content to also curate and roll up content based on any attribute that I choose, because I hope that right now a scope of, you can scope a highlighted content web part to a site collection, a site, or everything, and I'm hoping that a hub site will again provide, I know it's going to provide a restricted search scope, so I assume that's going to work in highlighted content. So that would actually allow you to do all of those things for a program, which is a collection of projects.
Yep. Which the hard part about that, in my opinion, is we're telling you that that's the way you have to do it, but then we're also telling you that you can't really have it until January or February when it comes out in the first of the year. So I would say you kind of need to plan for it. I would, if I had to do it, I would have a separate site collections, especially in SharePoint Online. I think it would have to be a extreme circumstance for me to do any type of subwebs inside of SharePoint Online. And if you actually look at the modern site experience that you get, when you create a subweb, you're getting all the classic experiences. I think they're doing everything they can to keep us from creating subwebs. So I would create a site collection that kind of became my, I'll call it my future hub, and I might take the time to create a list on the homepage that says here's all the projects with links to them, and kind of do a little bit of manual work. And then once HubSpots, I keep saying HubSpot, it's not, once hub sites come out, then I would convert that into a hub, which would be something you'd probably do in PowerShell in the beginning, and then connect the rest of them to that. That's probably how I would deal with it in the interim.
Yeah, I completely agree. My motto for all this is the world is flat, navigation connects the world. So today we can simulate this model by creating essentially a parent and then linking the children, but not subbing the children. And then eventually, as Jen suggested, once you get hub sites, make the parent a hub site.
Okay. The person who asked that question has just also asked, when will we get hub sites? This sounds like a good plan.
Beginning of the year is what they said. So I'm guessing, you know, January, February, March timeframe, they'll come out to first release, and then get flighted pretty soon. But I think they're pretty close on having them. So the first of the year is what they've said. And what's been great about the Microsoft team lately is when they give you an answer like that, they're usually you know, over promising. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, that's another big change is first release is being renamed as targeted release.
Oh, okay.
So that's another just thing,
Yeah, I
terminology
forgot
shift.
about that one. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
They'll probably change it to something else by the time
I
I
know.
remember to call it targeted release.
I know.
okay. Another question. From all your insights at Ignite, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the next 2 to 5 years for business users?
So I think with everything that's coming, and Satya said it one time in his keynote, and then somebody mentioned it in the keynote, the Office keynote, I believe, where they talked about how Office 365 and Microsoft 365 really are an evergreen software, and they're constantly changing. But if we really want true digital transformation, then some of our processes and how we do things need to be evergreen as well. So I think transitioning into that mindset of this isn't the way, you know, we can't say this is the way I've always done it. And there's of course that fine balancing line. We can't change our process every day, and we also can't change certain processes. Process is process for a reason. So it's knowing the difference between the two and being able to start to work in a way that is flexible to take advantage of these new things that are coming. And so I think it's a totally different mindset that people are going to have to get in, and getting into that digital transformation culture where you're willing and open and evaluating things to do differently, even at that end user level. I think that's going to be the trickiest thing. I think the tools are getting easier and easier to use, but I think the mindset is going to be a little tricky. I mean, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think that's why Satya had everyone at Microsoft read the Growth Mindset book. It's sort of worth thinking about that. It's the book by Carol Dweck, and I think she's actually consulting to Microsoft. It's really it's a way of thinking that it sort of makes sense. I would argue that, you know, big changes often happen with small steps. So when you ask someone to change, you have to create an opportunity that gives them an outcome that resonates with them. And so, and you can make these big transformational changes often by baby stepping your way in there. And when you look back at overall the little changes, you end up with a big change. So to me, asking everyone in the company to immediately drop what they're doing and like never use email again is probably an exercise in futility. But if you
100%.
Right, but if you can work with a team and get them to experience a success, to share the pains, to kind of meet on a regular basis, to talk about what it means to work differently and where the pain points are, what you end up with is what I call the when Harry met Sally moment of change management, which is one team looks at another team and says, I'll have what she's having. I mean, success breeds success. And you can't change the world necessarily by dictum, but you can change one team at a time. And so,
and for any millennials that might be tuned in, Harry Met Sally was a film back in the back in the.
Totally you can Google that phrase and watch that YouTube clip. It's Rob Reiner's mother, but it's Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal in Katz's Deli in New York. So there we go.
Very good.
It's worth watching, but I'm not going to describe it. So definitely, yes, for you millennials who don't know that movie, it is hysterical. So, yeah.
It's possibly on Netflix or I don't know.
It's on YouTube.
Like
I know. I have the clip downloaded because I often use it in presentations. Not the whole clip.
I was gonna say, ooh, I've been missing Sue's.
I'm bad, but I'm not that bad.
Okay, let's get this back on track here for a moment. Okay, I've an update on the person with the SharePoint, but I'll come to that in a moment. We'll come to questions. I'll hold you in suspense. I've heard the word groupify everything. Can you please talk more about this?
Yeah, so that's when you have a classic SharePoint site and you want to
Team
add,
site. Team site, right?
yeah,
Classic
classic team
SharePoint
site.
team
Yeah,
site.
yeah,
Yeah.
team site, yeah.
Yeah.
Not a publishing site, a team site. And you want to get the modern features and associate it with a modern group. And so what will happen is you can go in, there's just in the gear, there'll be a drop down and it will say add groups to this team site. And you click it, it will go through a process. It will add the new permission groups for you and give you the opportunity for you to put people in them. And then it will give you a new homepage based on the modern experience. Your old homepage will be like, so you get home and home one. So if you want to keep everything the way it looked, but just have that group's experience, you can go in and reset the homepage for the site. If you want to use all the new stuff, all the new web parts, new features will be there, and the permissions will remain intact. They're not going to change any permissions to the site, but then you get the new groups that can be there. And so that was something that they announced. It's basically being able to attach a older classic SharePoint team site to groups functionality.
Hey, Jen, I'll ask you this question because I wasn't sure about this, but I think I know the answer. When you do that, you're going to end up with 6 security groups, right? Because it's not going to change your classic groups,
Correct.
SharePoint groups, sorry. And it'll be your job to, so basically the reason that's okay is let's say you've done the break permissions all over the place and you're using your classic SharePoint groups. That won't be affected. However, what you really ought to now think about is, can I stop the madness, break things up differently, and over time migrate those permissions, add the previous members to the new group members, and add, I think it gives you the opportunity to put the owners into the owners and then really try to rethink how you've got your content organized. But it's not going to force you to do that. Everything that you used to have will work.
And it's not going to break.
Right.
Nothing's going to break when you do it. It's not going to force you to do it. But to get the true functionality, you're going to want to look at those people in the groups. But they make it really easy for you. When you go through the process, you can click on it and then add into those groups the people that you want. So if you know in the beginning who you want, it will be super easy to take care of it and do it. But it's not going to break anything.
Can I just, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I still would prefer that you never do that. What I really think we should do is use this as a moment and clean up the junk and use it as an opportunity to clean up our team sites that have a lot of crap in them so that search doesn't find all that crappy content, and that we actually clean it out for our team members, create a new group and migrate the content over. Now, you don't actually have to do that. So I would still clean before Groupify because I think that will create the optimum experience. But just because a site is pretty doesn't mean it's got great content. And just because you now have this great new search experience, if search can find all your old crap, it's not going to help the users. So I want you to strategically Groupify maybe, and maybe clean before Groupify. Because you'll never get a moment like this again. It's when because you're going to have to go clean up all those permissions anyways, and it's so hard to find the time to do that. And so my feeling is use these moments to do the right thing so that you can now have that best practice going forward. Soapbox off.
Okay, do you want the update on the, so thanks for the suggestion. I have flipped the classic modern view already to test it, and it works immediately. I'll create a blog post for my users to suggest this. So there you go. Well done to Jennifer and Sue for resolving the problem. Okay, next question. In relation to the sessions that you've attended, what would you recommend viewing?
Oh, holy cow.
Well, I would start out with Jeff Teeper's big keynote that was on Tuesday. It's like mobile, doing more with mobile, a SharePoint and mobile better together, something like that. It's the big keynote, the big Office keynote. From there was a session that Sean Squires did about working with the site templates and different things you can do there. There was a session that Lincoln Damaris did about list and libraries. It was like
that's a must. That was great.
I love Lincoln.
Just say that one again in case anyone missed it.
It was Lincoln Damaris. I'm going to try to pull up some of the numbers for it.
Yeah, I was trying to do that too. Aaron Rimmer wrote a post in the tech community, Pre-Ignite, where he summarized all the SharePoint and OneDrive sessions. I actually would look at that because he actually listed all the ones that we are just talking about. So I'm going to see if I can find that in that
And then
post.
there's another one that Chris McNulty and Karim did about Power Apps over SharePoint that I think is really fantastic as well. So those are some of the major ones that I saw. Like Sue said, it started at the beginning and then there's drill down. There's also one about communication sites. So basically, if you watch Jeff Teeper's keynote, for every major announcement that comes out in Jeff Teeper's keynotes, there's usually 2, possibly 3 other sessions that drill down in later in the week.
And didn't he, at the end of it, have a slide that had, I think almost all the Microsoft speakers did a really good job at the end of their slide, they showed all the related sessions. So I think if you start with Jeff's Monday keynote that he did with Ron Markovich, I think if you look at that, at the end of it, they have a list of the other related sessions. I can't find Aaron's post in Tech Community, but he basically wrote, like, what are all the SharePoint sessions?
Yep, I found it. I will put it in our chat, and then you guys can share that out.
Yeah, sure. I'll be able to compile a page after this, and I'll put all the links in there, whatever needs to be in there. So if you can send it to me, Jennifer, I'll take care of it.
Yeah, she has it. It's in our chat.
Okay. Oh, yes, there it is. Sorry. I was too busy looking out the window. Actually, let me bring this page up, and I can share it with everyone. So. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, he did a great job. He organized them by topic. It's really good.
Yeah.
Scroll to the top of it. Yeah. Unfortunately, the link goes a little bit, goes to the bottom, but if you scroll to the top.
There.
There you go.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's great. That's a great question because there's a great answer. So check out this page, and I'll just copy and paste the link in just in case anyone didn't get the link. Bear with me here for one moment, and I'll also put the link into the page afterwards. I'm in trouble with multitasking today, as you can see. I'm not trying to talk and do this at the same time. Okay, yeah, so I'll have the link in there, but yeah, that's really cool. That's
yeah, the one thing he didn't do, I was like really annoyed because he asked me to do the session. So Dave Feldman and I did a session on Thursday where we actually demonstrated sort of a modern intranet and how we built it, and then we gave away all of our web parts, all the custom web parts we built. They're available in SharePoint Patterns and Practices, and then we gave away the planning template that we use with our users to help them think about how to make a great site. About how to make a great communication site. And so that's BRK 2244. And if you search for that in Tech Community, we've got links actually to all of those tools that we gave away.
Okay, super. That's super helpful. Okay, love that comment. Just because the site looks great doesn't mean it's got great content. You still have the main problem: users and what they add and don't remove. Yeah, that's an ongoing problem, definitely. Yeah. Okay, next question. I don't know if this is actually right for this forum, but we'll throw it out there. Anyways, the quantum computing bit by Satya Nadella, did you understand it?
You want my honest answer?
Yeah, go for it.
I wished I had paid attention in physics class in college because basically, no. Actually, no. Actually, didn't Corey do a great blog post? Jen plugged that. Yeah. I understood more from Corey. I even told him I didn't understand a thing. Thank God you wrote that.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting next to my husband during the keynote. Well, Sue was too, and he was geeking out and getting it. I mean, what I took from it is, yeah, I don't understand it. I should have paid more attention in physics. I probably didn't even have classes that are going to help me understand this. But this is, going to greatly impact our kids and our grandkids and what's coming in the future. I mean, it's a super, futuristic thing, and the fact that they're showing off that they're doing it. I know enough to know that we really should know about it. I don't know enough to know why. And since I watch a lot of Big Bang Theory, I got some really good jokes there because I knew all about Schrodinger's cat because of
Yeah, I knew that too. Right, that one I
on
did.
Big Bang Theory, but but no, I'm sorry. You're definitely stumping us on this one.
Okay. So I won't ask you to elaborate, or please explain what that
No.
talk is.
No, but Jen, can you put a link to Corey's blog post? Because actually it was really helpful for me.
Yeah, just pulled that up. Yeah. My husband wrote a kind of a summary on it and
Oh,
shared it
wow.
with everybody. So, there you go. There's a link to that if anyone's interested. He could explain it better than Sue and I.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, Corey Roth. Okay, I think this is definitely worth taking a read. But
He wrote it for regular people like me and Jen, so I think that was actually it was a very kind thing to do. But I asked Corey how he knew all that. He did say he had to do a lot of research. Like it wasn't completely obvious for even his super smart brain. So
no, and he's honestly been doing research on this area for, I don't know, a long time. It's definitely, he geeks out in this area.
Yeah, I have a picture on screen. It doesn't look like a surface as we know it at the moment. Yeah, that's super. I will definitely be okay, I'll definitely have to take a read through that. Okay, that's brilliant. I will include that link in our page as well, and if anybody needs to, you can see the link here as well, just in case you need to type it in. Okay. Guys, can I ask you a question? Because there was so much announcements and various different things going on in relation to everything in the business world. Where do you think, or what do you think wasn't covered? Hello?
Hello.
I thought I lost everyone there for a second. Do you think there was any bit that you thought, oh, I hope they announce something on this, and it didn't happen for you? And you're like, oh, okay, we'll have to wait till the next Ignite or come to the European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure conference to get that answer.
I'm the only area and I think that's hard for me to answer because I stay in such contact with them for so long that I feel like they released a lot of things they told me that were coming, or problems that they said, yeah, Jen, I know that's a problem. We're going to solve that problem. I feel like that was put out, and since they've been getting into that cadence of doing it every May, they kind of tell us stuff and then things trickle in, and then they tell us what they're going to work on and more things trickle in. I feel like they've got a good rhythm with that. The one thing that disappoints me and will continue to disappoint me is until they fix it, is I still think Power Apps is a very low-code solution and not a no-code solution. So it was discouraging to see that they didn't get in and get a bunch of that taken care of, because I'd really love to see some of the simple stuff you do in Power Apps have less code involved. I mean, you have to know a lot of syntax and semicolons and understand objects and some development concepts to really make Power Apps shine. And I wish that wasn't the case. And I think every major conference, I hope that it's going to be the conference that they've heard our feedback and they're going to implement it. But they didn't for this conference. So I think that's my one area.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing I'm just still waiting for. I love hub sites, but I think of hub sites as family navigation, not global navigation. And, I design intranets for a living, and I think that users still want some form of connect me to the main event navigation, that it can't all be search and it can't all be driven from SharePoint Home, because people do actually still expect, and I know this is kind of evolutionary, it'll evolve, but they do expect to have sort of that top global nav. So I'd love that. Just allow me to easily share global nav across all of my now hundreds and hundreds of site collections.
Very good. Okay, guys, we're nearly at the top of the hour, and I'm just going to sort of do a quick summary on some of the things we're talking about. So if you need to just come back over a few things, but just some notes I've taken here and see what you think. So basically, I think Susan, you were saying talk about find what works for you in a team. So that's a really interesting point about it's not the end of email, and see what works. Jennifer, I think your idea of reviewing announcements and assigning one member of the team, I think that's a really good takeaway of something to do to help keep tabs on all these updates. I think that's a really good. I think hub sites, family of sites is a great way to do it. And the world, you mentioned there, the world is flat, everything connects to it. So I think that's really good.
The navigation connects the world is what I would say.
Navigation connects the world, great. I think the a really interesting one there is the first release has now been changed to targeted release. You mentioned a book there, What Reading the Growth Mindset book, so that's probably something we should all probably just, if you haven't already read it, definitely worth take a look at, especially your comment there about big changes over small steps. Groupify everything, clean up the junk. I think that's a really good takeaway. And migrate content. Just because a site looks good doesn't mean it's actually good. And in relation to the sessions from Ignite Checkout, you were saying Jeff Teeper, the Sean Squire, and the Aaron Rimmer, the tech community. So they're my kind of highlights, guys. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, actually, I was concerned that Jen and I wouldn't have enough to talk about, but I don't think that's an
issue. Well, I don't know about everybody else that's been here, but I have thoroughly enjoyed today's session with both Sue Hanley and Jennifer Mason. I'd like to thank you both for taking the time out to do this. I know, Sue, you're based in Washington, and Jennifer, you're based in Dallas, and it's it's an early morning start for you guys. So taking the time and putting in the effort, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun. Always enjoy it.
Fun. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, guys, thank you so much, and we will move it on from there. Okay, that's it for today, everybody. I just want to do a quick wrap up and say thanks to all the people that participated in our Ignite Roundup sessions this year. That includes Jeremy Take, Vesa Juvonen, Jose Rone, Sue Hanley, and Jennifer Mason. Absolutely brilliant having them with us today. Join us for our next webinar, Anticipating Change, How to Future-Proof Your Business Applications by Michael Reikirk. He is the Business Development Manager at WebCon, and that's happening on Thursday, October 12th, 2017 from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. CEST. That's it. Thank you and goodbye.